So how are you, man?
Oh, I'm good. What's up with you? How you doing?
I'm really good. I can't complain. Um, yeah, very well. Just doing what we do. Like I was saying earlier, so much of my time is taken up just researching at the moment. Doing a lot of reading. I'm always buying books as well. I don't know if you're like that.
Oh yeah, well I was for a moment,
Yeah,
but then I started reading the same ones over and over and over again, trying to make sure I comprehend them. You know what I'm saying? So yeah,
I
I got
like.
a little library, but I haven't been book shopping lately.
No, that's good, and I like that because I think that reflects in your field. You're very much a specialist, so I get. Would you guys fast calling yourself a linguist? I would, but I don't know if
I
you.
wouldn't call myself that. Um, Professionally, I'm an artist, but then
Yeah.
we have an occupation and we have a vocation,
Mm,
right? And your vocation being what you're just naturally drawn towards, your inclination towards something which occupies you, and it ain't
mm,
even your occupation. And in a sense, I found the love of wisdom in being an artist and a lyricist. And so
mm.
my love of wisdom translated over to the Netjer, ancient African languages, and particularly hieroglyphs, being down with a group called hieroglyphics.
Yeah.
So I was like, I mean, how you gonna be down with that and not really dive into it? So I've
Yeah,
surrounded myself by Egyptologists and linguists, but they just know me as the dude who really, really deep into it. But just
yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Well, here's the funny thing, yeah. So first of all, you say like, I was surrounded. Well, no, my name was our name was hieroglyph, so I felt the need to get into it, and I feel like you're saying that like it's a common trait. I don't think it is. I think plenty of people will be happy to have had the name hieroglyphs and done nothing about it. But the fact that your character was like, nah, like I ain't gonna call myself this unless I understand what's going on. I think that tells a lot about you as a person. I think you're yeah, I haven't seen anything like it. If I'm going to be real, for
I
someone to
appreciate that. Well, when
so,
we started to bring out history of the Magi and these vanguards of Kemet, I started to take up archery. So I
yeah,
brought my first bow because I realized that this was probably a recreational pastime for people like myself thousands of years ago. So I was
dope.
like, man, what's up? They was trying to be accurate with the bow. Let me try to do that too. So, it's just trying to do it as best we could do it.
Dope. I love that. I love that. Um, what's that? I'm trying to think of that. There's an artwork that shows the populations down the Nile. I'm trying to remember what it's called. Mr. Imhotep did a good video on it,
Are
and
you talking
obviously,
about ancient artwork that shows the populations down in there?
yeah, it's like a painting. So it's a Hellenistic painting. Can't
Oh, it's
remember what it's.
Hellenistic.
Yeah,
I,
so
I,
it's not an Egyptian one.
Yeah, I possibly could not recite what that is.
I don't know if it's like the I can't remember what it's called. Well, basically, it shows the populations up the Nile. So obviously, down in Seti,
Hmm.
land of the bow. I'm with you actually now. So Seti is the land of the bow. That's how it translates. Is that correct? Or
I would translate that as the land of the bow. However, it's hard to find an ancient Egyptian word seti for a bow. The ancient
mm.
Egyptian word seti actually means shoot. And
Oh,
so if you really want to go there, it's the land of the shooters.
land of the shoot. Oh
You know
my
what I'm saying?
god.
Yeah. Ancient Egyptian bow is called a pejet. A pejet.
So
And so to think about it, they was indicating the skill with hitting the spot, basically.
but that's what it
Archery.
is. That's what it is then. Why are we calling it? Why are we even referring to the bow? See, this is the thing. This is why I like talking to you. And this is what, and it kind of emphasizes the conversation that we were having earlier is that me personally, I am very, very, very bored of having to take the route of interpretation through the academic orthodoxy, then fed back to us. I'm getting increasingly bored with that route because I keep finding that so much is lost in going there and then it coming back to us. You deal with primaries. We're in front of the primaries. And then we have people over there 3 feet from the Nile. Like, I know what that word means. We still use it. So why am I listening to you out here? Do you know what I mean? Who's made your interpretation based on your Western understanding and your all of your Western paradigms and all of your European projections onto what was an African society. You call this place Land of the Bow. You, as someone who's read the Medunetta, has said there's nothing referring to the bow here. It means to shoot. Why did they choose to call it Land of the Bow? I know they were bowmen, but why did they choose not to take the literal interpretation? Do you think? I feel like there's something in that, personally.
Well, so just I don't want to mislead anyone. If we look at a hieroglyph of Seti, we will see a bow.
So,
but the word in every other word, if we do the research, they translate a bow as paget. But when it comes to Seti, they translate it as a seti, as if there's a particular bow named Seti. But when we look into another glyph that we will find is a foxtail with an arrow through it, sometimes related to shooting. This is the term that you would vocalize seti, and it would actually mean to shoot. So yeah, we might see a bow there, but I often wondered, I actually did the research and I found that in the earlier days, I could show you E.A. Wallace Budge first translated Seti as Paget because he was saying it was the land of the bow. So I never found why they tried to switch that up, but the word seti actually means to shoot. So yeah, you're right. And furthermore, to speak to your point, there's a scholar named Daniel Selden. He's from the University, I think, Santa Barbara, and he wrote. He basically kind of rewrote some older works. He has Egyptian hieroglyphs as well. His work, but in his work, he speaks highly. Well, I don't want to say speaks highly. He's one of the only one who draws comparison between what some call African American vernacular English and the ancient Egyptian language. And in his work, it's like a 500-page book, and he's talking about how no other language, there's certain grammatical points. Basically, if you will allow me, that you know how I be chilling, you know, like a statement like that would seem like it's so far out of the King's English, but we will actually find statements like this. This is the structure of Middle Egyptian grammar, to say I exist in a state of whatever that state of is. It would be cooling or chilling. And so, and there's others to say that we should not feel any, I mean, of course we could take prerogative to match things up with things that we find more suitable, as we are, some might argue, genetically attached to these Africans, right? And so even understanding cultural, there's always a cultural understanding, or some things that people even superimpose on the cultures that they don't understand correctly. And so I look at text sometimes and say, just to give an example, and some might try to argue against this, but if you do just the slightest bit of research, we'll see something that they labeled the cannibal hymn, and they tried to give an ode towards real cannibalism. If you do if you really look into it, it seems like the preamble or ode to ancient African wordplay that still survives today in battle rap or in modern orator's culture, where the chief way to get rid of an enemy is through devouring him. And so in hip hop culture, we call it eating MCs, right? No one ever thought that was a cannibal hymn when I said I was going to eat MCs. But because Unes said he was going to eat all of the Netjer and do all of these things, devour them once he becomes deceased, it has been written in the Egyptology as a cannibal hymn. And so if I didn't take the license to say, nah, that's like a battle rap beat, and I would like you to prove it's not, you know, because we still use this ultimate even in the schemata or the mental metaphors, you know how we would just think of things in order to compare things to show people another thing. It was the Netjer Amet who would devour one's soul if your heart wasn't lighter than a feather. So that would let us know their chief, the chief way to get rid of something evil was also through a sense of devourment that we still find in hip hop. So everything you say in 100, yeah, we don't need to do it the way others have said we should have to do it.
Absolutely, man. And I think one of the things what you've just said there that rings true for me is that I'm not saying that we cast off or we completely separate ourselves from that field, but I say that we have to reestablish what the order of primacy is. We have to decide what comes first. I know who I prioritize. I know what interpretation I prioritize. And that's because, you know, we're dealing with a field that has been rife with misinformation since its very inception. It was, in my view, it was created to deceive the entire field of Egyptology. It might have started to come good in the last few decades, you know, people with more integrity taking up the field, but in its inception, it was there to create a field that basically gave exclusive access to, you know, people who were colonizing that region to the knowledge that was coming out of that place, and also separate the domestic Africans from that civilization, which prior to Egyptology was always regarded as an African civilization. There wasn't this debate. There was no discussion about it. It was regarded by everyone, the Arabs who were there, the Egyptology, everyone just like, oh, ancient Egypt or Kemet or whatever, that black civilization, those Africans, yeah, this is the African place. And even it's so where we are right now, people don't realize how devoid from reality this place is now, where we're having to argue the blackness or the Africanity of the ancient Egyptians. Are just, yeah, but it bewilders me. I pause it because I do want to go into seti because we touched on it, and this has actually been one of my bugbears. So I want to get this question to you as someone who I respect in terms of being able to read the primary sources. From my understanding, seti is the first sipat of Kemet. So if you look in the sipat, the nome list, seti is number one. It's always been the first sipat of Kemet throughout its history, as far as I know. Number one, seti. So why is seti looked upon by Egyptology, or why is, in fact, a better question is, to you as someone who reads the primaries, are there occasions when the sipat seti appears and then that's translated by Egyptology to mean Nubian? i.e., do they use the existence of these people being from seti as an opportunity to separate them? Because we know seti was indisputably black from, you know, it was like one of the most black. It was like they were very dark black in seti. Do they use that as an opportunity to actually say, oh, seti, and then kind of go Nubian, even though there's nothing, like seti was just another sipat? It's like taking a Theban and going, oh, Thebans are something different. If someone's from seti, or something's happening in seti, then that's happening in the land of Kemet. What's your view on that?
Okay, well, there is a lot of you know, mischievous play behind that, but here's the deal: I have to give some credence to one, whether they use the correct terminology or not, because we could talk about how the term Nubian has been weaponized in order to basically separate anything of the darker hue out of what we call Egypt. They say, oh, this Egyptian, this is Nubian. Nevertheless, seti existed long before the unification of what we would call Egypt. And it existed as a culture that was, I mean, it was, I don't want to say monolithic, but you can find, going back to like the Cialis seal, which I think Gunther Dreyer pushed back to 3600 BC, where we see the precursors to ancient Egyptian writing. and a term seti written on there long before Egypt could have been conceptualized. And it was long before Egypt was conceptualized, and it was found in the regions of gold. And so, to be fair to their assessment of why some may address it in that way, it is because, okay, it did exist before, even though it was the first Sephat of Egypt. Before they unified and made that the first Sephat, it was already existing as its own thing before Egyptians were ever thought of. Now, one might say, well, that was before Nubians were ever thought of too. But in the term Nubia, as they use it, is indicating people from that region of gold, as ancient Egyptian term for gold would be Nup. You feel me? And then the probably come from some Romans or some Greeks later, because the just meaning the place of. You see what I'm saying? And so they probably were forced into using it that way because they wanted to speak of people who lived in that area long before, in the areas of gold, long before those who decided to come be Egyptians. And I'm not saying that that was a different contingency of people. I think it was more of a cultural line that got drawn in the sand, kind of like, y'all do it like that, we do it like this. Are we gonna keep doing it like this, or y'all? And then things start to separate just the same way tribes start to separate. But in the initial state, you're right, we did have temporally and geographically. And when I mean geographically, it is the first known coming from the south or upper Egypt, as well as temporally with the sense of time. It was the first, it existed before the unification. And so just to add to that before I close on that, if we talk about the archaeological extractions found in Seti, we'll be talking about Nubia. These are done by George Reisner, Nubia A group through X group. But if we're talking about, we go up like 5 nomes up, we're going to be in an area called Nakata, which they talk about Nakata 1 through Nakata 3C or even further. And they call these the first ancient Egyptian excavations. Now, one thing we should know, and then I'll just turn this over, when they did choose to unify, they said the group from Nakata up at about the 5th nome came down first, fought in the areas of the Seti nome, whomever prevailed then went northward. Now, I ask you a question. If Nakata, they probably did come down, but then I always think to myself, well, why wouldn't they have named their excavation in Nakata the first nomes? Because they probably came down, got hands put on, and then the dudes in Seti was like, where they come from? Let's go back up and unify things. Now, at that point, I am speculating, and I hope people know that. But there's a point where we have to begin that. But I've been long-winded, so.
No, you're not being long-winded at all. And to be honest with you, they're speculating to begin with. In fact, so much of Egyptology is built on speculation. I don't believe the evidence is there to support many of the, it doesn't take, one thing I've learned being, researching in this field for as long as I've been doing it, is that it doesn't take, researchers and archaeologists a lot to spin up a story. And when they spin up a story, it normally comes from a place of their own paradigms and behaviors, things that they're used to. So much of Egyptology has been translated through a lens of Western history. When they're translating it, they think, well, how do our kings behave in this circumstance? If they find a mummy and the mummy's got a hole in the skull, King Tut or whoever it is was murdered in probably by his father. Like, wait a second, where are you getting this all from? Do you understand what I mean? Like, you've got one wound and you've drawn up an entire theory, but that's based on stories that you've grown up hearing about this French ruler who murdered his son and then placed his daughter or whatever. Do you know what I mean? So it's all coming from a place of their own understanding, and often with very little in the way of evidence. You know, so I think your speculations are as valid as their speculations.
Right, and it's not just mere speculations. There are some newer scholars who they're opening it up. All of the newer Egyptologists and even Nubiologists, they are on our side of the argument. It seems like they surrendered their forefathers' ambitious claims towards Egypt, and now they're not even surrendering it to the quote-unquote modern Egyptian who are making some claims towards that. They're saying, no, it was black people, basically. And I show various different modern Egyptologists say that. But as my research gets deeper, I start to find in the 40s and 50s, Europeans who was saying it then, but their work, it would make it high in the field, but it would be written in a German document, and it was nothing that they're going to recite out to the masses. They just be talking amongst themselves like, yo, B, like, yo, this is straight African, you know what I mean? I mean, one of the ones
the way you said African. Sorry, carry on.
Herman Ranke, who did the persons and names of the Middle Kingdom. And this was such a good work that you can find it digitized now. It's called the P and the PNM or something, PNM. Yeah, and basically in his work, he took all the titles and all the names we found on any and every stela and then categorized them. And we'll get into what he said about Kemet, people who call themselves Kim and Kemet, once we get to that part of the conversation.
I'm looking forward to it. And actually, just to jump on the point that you raised earlier, because you actually you said you were ranting, but you actually gave a very good diatribe about why Seti was classified as Nubia, and then even to now they keep that classification. But to me, that entire perspective just supports everything that I've been saying, that they shouldn't be using the separate term for Nubia, because if we're talking about a unification, a unification is a coming together of different people. So you can't suddenly say they were part of the unification but remained a separate people.
Exactly.
It doesn't make any sense. It's one or the other. They were either a part of the unification and therefore a part of Kemet moving forward through history, which is what the evidence suggests. It never suggests that there was some kind of independence rally from, Seti towards the rest of Egypt.
That's a wonderful way to put it, bro. You got a clever mind that just unraveled it in that way. I've never even seen it that way. But like, who are these people who unified? How are you excluding these people called Nubia? You got to be two people to unify. I mean, exactly. at least two to start with.
How can you take the ones up there and say, well, they're both the real Kemet, because it takes both of them to make Kemet. You can't take the ones up there and say, well, these are the real Kemetic people, and the ones down here who became the South weren't. It's like, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't make sense, It's like saying the Scottish are the real Brits and the English aren't. No, Britain is one land now, and Scots, Welsh, British, English and Northern Irish all make up Britain. Equally.
Plutarch or Diodorus Siculus, I think it was Diodorus Siculus who said that the Egyptians were a colony sent out by the Ethiopians.
Yep.
And Osiris was the one who sent them out. And so now if we take what he said, he kind of saying what we saying. Now you could go up to Dr. Ben, who said that Egypt was the daughter of Nubia, as he would say it. But then if you want to go to some Hebrew tradition, they say it similarly with their birth tradition of Cush going down to Mizraim, and you know how all that happens. And so it's really not too many people who don't tell you in their own way that this stuff was all birthed out of a more southern tradition.
Do you know the literary record of the origins of Kemet are very well documented in comparison to other ancient societies. In other ancient societies, they will get one, like look at Rome, for instance. They have that single account of Romulus and Remus, and they've drawn that whole thing out to say this is the origins of the Romans. With Egypt, we have multiple scholars all agreeing on the origins of Egypt being birthed from the Ethiopians, and yet somehow there's still a debate to be had. It's like, what are we doing here? Why are we always looking for layers of information? Because the answer that we've been given is an unsatisfactory one. They don't like the comes from Ethiopia argument, and so they use other sciences and different angles to try and round about what is actually supported by the archaeological evidence anyway.
So there are particular antagonists and YouTube characters and certain people who would make us think that Egyptologists take that argument seriously. But as I dialogue and even try to get some to come out and talk about it, and some of them look at it like it's so, like you guys are so right that I'm not even like, don't even ask me to do that. That's so beneath you. Let's go and look at something of more significance. And I've even got almost a little bit turned off by some. I dare to call them my peers or colleagues, but these are people in the field that I dialogue with that got their PhDs and they're running full departments, and they like turn their head to the side with me, like kind of like you really want me to come help you beat that dead dog? Like, you know what I'm saying? The one that we already relinquished Egypt, because white people ain't saying that the ancient Egyptians are white anymore. There was a point in time where they literally coined a term called the
academics maybe aren't, but I think there's a lot of people
still are.
What's that?
Some people still are making that claim.
Yeah, especially the young. You know, this, remember, we live in the era of, you know, internet supremacy, you know, and it's a breeding ground out there, you know. A lot, like you said, a lot of these content creators, if you look at their followings, they're vast. And obviously I feel like the modern Egyptian antiquities as well is having, well, when I say modern, I mean since Hawass, so let's say going back 30 years or so since Hawass took over, they've had a massive impact, particularly on the Egyptian population, but also on other people. For everyone, a lot of these, you know, white people are now banding behind the Arab argument. The ancient Egyptians were Arab argument, but maybe I'm in a bit of a, that's what I'm seeing. I could be wrong.
Okay. Definitely you won't find that on the academic level. You're right. So you see how the great debunkings have been happening on YouTube. You know, between certain type of YouTube scholars, and then they go find this academic person who comes and shows him up with the information. It's funny that you probably won't see that happening in this field. You know what I'm saying?
Are you talking about Billy Carson?
Yeah, Billy.
That's hilarious, man.
That ain't the only one. The Billy Carson West stuff. Then there was another one. They just had Professor Dave, Lord Jamar.
Yeah, and I don't like Professor Dave.
You can see there a guy named Professor Dave and Lord Jamal about flat Earth.
I know that one, yeah, but I don't like Professor Dave. I have to put that out. I don't like him, but carry on.
Oh, that's what you said.
He did a video about Egypt recently.
Oh, for real?
So this, yeah, he did a video about Egypt recently, and he was spitting the same Metatron. Yeah, he was spitting that same kind of like. I think he tried to touch on Black Egypt. Yeah, he tried to touch on Black Egypt.
Oh, I could probably call Professor Dave out for a dialogue, but some of the points that I like to lean on, not trying to segue over, but we know, and we got taught by Diop and a lot of other people that we used to need to use multiple fields. I lean heavily on philology just to try to see what they said. And, you know, if there's any point in the linguistics where we could find them talking about these cultural items. And it may limit my approach in some regard, but I'm not an anthropologist, and so I use other people's work to put on top of mine. I've talked to some of the leading PhDs in the field, epigraphers and people who sit there and copy over. I just had a dialogue with Professor Jonathan Winterman on the subject, and I was elated to get a compliment from him on how well I was reading the glyphs when we was breaking it down. He was like, "Man, you getting it in. You know what I'm saying? And you can see the thrill
Yeah.
on his face. And so I'm saying that to say I don't think we're going to find the academic opposition to what we're saying. But when we talk about this, you know, the quote unquote I don't want to necessarily say modern Egyptian, but for lack of better words, the attack that is all government supported. They got funding behind debunking Black Egypt. And just to be academic with it, this when Egyptology came out, the contemporaneous modern Egyptian back then was not making a claim towards it. As a matter of fact, it was before Nazir. It was a person who came out with a movement called Pharaonism. And he was like, this is because we all know that it's heavily supported by tourism. I mean, it's basically they renovated all these things to support the tourism. But Pharaonism was the exact quotation of their state movement to make a claim on the antiquity of ancient Egypt. Because the Arabs, once they took over the Maghreb, they was trying to put in Pan-Arabism. And they and in a moment after that, the people of Egypt was like, hold up, we're going to do Pharaonism. And what's that? They was like, oh, we're going to say that, you can literally see it in the documents. They're like, we're going to say that the ancient Egyptian relics are all our ancestors.
Yeah.
And so if anybody is aware of this movement, it would be hard for them to say that is really a fact.
You're absolutely right. It's in the curriculum. So this is the thing. I have dialogue because I've got a TikTok channel. I have dialogue with a lot of young Egyptians, and they do really bizarre things. Like, so they'll see like a picture of a pharaoh and they go, oh, that's my uncle. They all say it. So it's not like one of them will do it. It's like it's a mantra among them. That's my uncle. That's my auntie. That's my. I'm like, this is weird because I ain't heard no one across the world speak like that about ancient relics. But this is a mantra that's being placed into the curriculum. So they're being taught when they, from a young age, when they go up, you know, you are the ancient Egyptians are your ancestors. These are your uncles. These are your aunties. And all of this emotive, non-academic, and actually entirely inappropriate language is being used. And that's the kind of emotional tie that they're creating. And actually it has an impact. Going back to your point regarding academia, and I think one of the reasons why a lot of the Egyptologists don't want to get involved in the discussion, i.e. they're like, oh no, leave it to you, Smash, you've got a good hand in it. They are very scared of Egyptian antiquities.
You're right.
They're terrified. Egyptian antiquities only needs to get a sniff, and this has happened. This has been proven. So for instance, what happened with that, was it, which university was it?
It was a Dutch university.
Dutch university.
Was it the Fitz?
Yes, the Dutch university that did the Black exhibition, and they I don't know if they've had that reinstated, but they do it entirely revoked. They've been doing a dig there for like over 20 years. They've been doing an excavation. They entirely revoked it. Egyptian antiquities cut them off, and it's not the first time. Even that reconstruction artist that I fell out with. So you know the one that me and him had a academic back and forth, the Cesare Moraes. I don't know if you know about that, but the one who did the white version of Amenhotep.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Yeah, so me and him had that back and forth, but obviously he lets me know what's going on, and he's blacklisted in Egypt as well because they said that he did the reconstructions without their permission. So they do not play. So if you want to get blacklisted immediately, you just have to even sniff at saying any pharaoh or any. And by the way, the reason they came at him was not because of his white reconstructions. He did Nazlet Qatar or Nazlet Qatar, I don't know how you say it, the 35,000-year-old Egyptian mummy. So the oldest Egyptian mummy they have, 35,000 years old. I think everyone agrees 35,000 years ago everyone was black anyway, but he did a reconstruction of Nazlet Qatar, and he did it black for obvious reasons. It had very overtly, it wasn't even like modern black features, which you could say you and I and other people maybe have modern black features. This skull was overtly black. Like it can't be anything but black, like, you know. And yeah, so since that they've blacklisted him and they said you're not allowed, you know, to basically we don't want to have anything to do with you, and we don't really want to see you around any of our sites, this, that, and the other. So there is a fear. I don't know if you've picked up on that. There's a definite fear amongst the Egyptologists to involve themselves openly in this discussion about Black Egypt.
Oh, I definitely did notice that, and I didn't know how far some of them wanted to take their fears. Like if they would just go straight punk out and be like, "Go ahead, you do it." You know what I'm saying? And some of them have done that to me. Some of them who've actually allowed me access to parts of the museums that the average person couldn't get in. So I know for a fact they got my back. You see what I'm saying? But it's something hanging over their head that don't want to make them come out in public with that conversation. And you just probably pinpointed what it is. There is a quote unquote task force. And I mean, I could not say quote unquote. There's literally a task force against Black Egypt, and those who speak on or research it. It would be to where if they had as much power as some of the other people in the world, they would enact something close to anti-ascetism, you feel me? And it'd be anti-Kemetism, but they would be saying, you feel me, that they Kemet, and if we say anything about Black Egypt, we're doing anti-Kemetism, basically.
Yes.
If they had power like that, that's how they want it, you know?
You feel that? Well, I think they have that mantra, don't they, which is Egypt for Egyptians, which is quite similar when you think about it. What they're saying there, it's their way of basically saying. So anytime I do a post or anything, just highlighting the links between ancient Kemet and modern Africans, which are almost infinite. So I do all those posts all the time because there's so much cultural continuity between ancient Egypt and modern African societies. The first thing that any dissenter from modern Egypt will post is Egypt for Egyptians. So it's kind of like it's a word or it's a term that's being used, or let's put E for E as their kind of way of saying you're not allowed to talk about this subject. You're attacking us by even suggesting that. And what I find actually quite bizarre is that if you look at it under the hood, it essentially reveals what they know to be true, because you'll find this emotive response is only linked with Black Egypt. If I did what I did and I made pharaohs white, blonde hair with blue eyes, I wouldn't have any Egypt for Egyptian people on my page. They either would support it or they wouldn't care. Those would be the two emotions, because they're okay with being, linked with white people, and they're also okay with ancient Egypt being associated with white people. If I made pharaohs look Chinese, they wouldn't have a problem with it. It would be irrelevant to them. But there's something very distinctive about the energy that everybody chimes in and everybody has an opinion when you make pharaohs Black. That's suddenly everyone responding now. Oh, they weren't like this. Well, where's this come from? You know?
I mean, if we was so simple, it's a good way to just tell that you on to the truth. Like if we would just simplify things, but we so complicated. You could take all these other topics, no one react. And then it's called hit dog holler. That's what we call it, right? Like if you just throw a rock up in the air, the hit dog gonna holler. So if we throw all these topics out, nobody say nothing. Then you throw out the Black one, they go, oh, it's like, it's like you saying, who got my wallet? And the person like, oh, your wallet? You like, man, let me take your pockets. They doing the same thing. Like, it's kind of like, why? It's basically an indication that, even if they were one of my offspring, that type of reaction would tell me, let me investigate this one thing further, because I said all these other things and none of my offering reacted. But when I said the one thing about Black, they started covering things up and acting all suspicious. And so, I mean, we look at things so complicated, but it's a telltale sign if we just simplify it. You know what I mean?
I love that analogy, the hit dog collar. I love it. I love that analogy. That's exactly it. That's exactly it. It's like, guilty. That's the one. This is the one that's what they're hiding, because that's what's made you react. And it's funny. I mean, I had an interview with Professor Ampim a good few months back, maybe even approaching a year, and he does a lot of work in regards to sabotaged pieces in ancient Egypt. So he looks at the fake pieces and he looks at the pieces that have been sabotaged. And he says, and I know this to be true because I've started documenting these as well, but he says that you can go to Egypt now and you'll see, you know, members of the public, you know, an ancient piece of work just hitting the nose or something like that. If it's within reach and there's something too African about what they're seeing, they'll attack it. And they do that to this day. It's not like this is a past behavior. This is something that's happening right now. And that to me shows me that they know, you know, because why are you attacking? Like, why would you attack the way that they present themselves? You know, why would that offend you? Why would you feel the need to lighten? I've got these, I don't know if I've got a short that shows one of King Tutankhamun's Shawabtis when they found it, covered in dark brown paint, and after they had restored it with all of the paint scratched off. You've probably seen it. It's the one where he looks like Michael Jackson. Yeah, so there's an Ushabti where he looks like Michael Jackson. He looks that way. That one used to be dark brown, as in dark brown like this, all over. And they sanded it off. And they said, oh, look, we've restored it. We got rid of the dirt.
Yeah, exactly.
You know? So the fact that, you know, one of the analogies I actually give is a story in the Bible with King Solomon, where where there's these two women who are arguing over a baby. And they're both saying, no, the baby's mine, the baby's mine. And so King Solomon says, look, stop arguing, give me the baby. I'll saw the baby in half. You can have one half, you can have one half. And then obviously one of the women's like, yes, saw the baby in half, I'll take one half. And then he goes, okay, cool. You're not the real mom, she's the real mom. Exactly. And he gives it to her. And that reminds me of what you see in ancient what you see in modern Egypt right now. Like they're willing to deface, destroy, chisel, you know, sandblot, like they're willing to do anything, you know, dig up the mummies. Yeah, dig up the mummies, put them up for sale. They have no respect because they have no connection to the culture. It's something that they get pride from. It's something that they can stake a claim in history that doesn't belong to them, and it's something that drives a lot of funding for the nation, and so they're willing to do that. Right. If you look at African people, even ones, I'm Nigerian, I'm not claiming to even have roots in ancient Kemet. I might do, but I don't need to make that claim.
Exactly.
You know, but if you look at me as an African, even I'm more protective of ancient Egyptian relics than they are. I don't want to see them touched. I don't want to see mummies dug up. I prefer that you put them back underground because I feel a way, you know, about that society. And so to me, that's, at least to me, it's analogous of that story told by King Solomon. You got a group of people who they're saying this has got nothing to do with you. The Nubians, you could even say the black Egyptians who used to take people around, who used to still utilize the temple of Ramesses right up until they flooded Aswan, you know, who engage in the old ways, who respect all of the relics. And then you got the new people who are just take it, dig it up, sell it, do whatever. You know.
Yeah. I would think about the more modern flooding of creation of that pseudo Lake Nazir, just to really just flood out all of the I hate to say Nahesi areas, you know what I'm saying? These southern areas where things come from. If you research a lot of the man-made lakes, not just in Africa, well, I don't know
across the world. I talk about this, man.
Yeah. All over America. That's what they do.
Flooding of antiquities is a big. We have them in Nigeria as well. Lake Kalenji. They have them everywhere. If you got these big man-made lakes where the waters went up like 60, 70 meters. I think it was 70 meters.
There's something ancient under there, huh?
Yeah. That's their way of burying African antiquity or burying parts of history that they don't want to be resurfaced.
Well, it's like that even in California. Lake Folsom was owned by Brother William Alexander Leidensdorf, and now it's just Lake Folsom. It got swindled by him by John Folsom. It was a greater area of California, but he owned 35,000 acres of California, and now it was an area where they was mining gold before 1849, mind you. You know, the San Francisco 49ers when all the Europeans rushed there, or the American Europeans rushed to the West Coast. He was in 1844.
I didn't know that's what 49ers meant.
Yeah,
So thank you
that's
for
the go to go back to that. That's why it's the San Francisco 49ers. They was rushing to the West Coast to get that gold. But in 1844, San Francisco, Yerba Buena Island was darn near owned by a brother named William Alexander Leidensdorf. And he had an area on the further part of his land called Negro Bar. They called it Negro Bar, where they was mining gold in 1844. So really, I started to think about that. Like, man, there was probably a whole bunch of brothers in Mississippi who was trying to make their way from the South out to where the gold was. Like, yo, it's money in the West. Somebody had to know. Anyway, not to throw us too far off subject, they flooded that and made it Lake Folsom, California.
Listen, and when I tell you, if people were mining gold, they weren't putting the proceeds of the gold into mud huts and barns. There's probably cities down there. That's what I'm saying. You know, this is the thing.
Right. The brother was so lucrative with his. Well, when they did come out in 1849 and wanted to take over Frisco, they took it from the Mexicans because he got his land grant from the Mexicans. Then, the Americans came and took Cali from the Mexicans. When they wanted to throw the governor's ball in San Francisco, guess where they threw it at? William Alexander Leidensdorf House. That's how balling he was. So it wasn't no mud shacks, and it was out there cracking. Like, so he had to, and he built the first schools in San Francisco. Now, when you think San Francisco, you think white, huh? It just sounds white, but no, that was straight. It was also a lot of other indigenous people there. I don't want to take nothing away from them. But the one who came and organized thing and rode the first steamboat on the California Delta was a brother named William Alexander Leidensdorf. But I only mentioned that because they flooded this stuff out just like they did in Nubia, just like they do. And so we were speaking on that.
No, look, man, I love that part of history. It's as painful as it is. One of the I don't know if you read a book called Sundown Towns. I always bring it out because it's such an amazing book. But yeah, it's a book basically about the fact that here's the rule. The rule of thumb is this. Every all-white, I'm not just talking about partially white, any all-white city or town, basically the whiter the city or town in America means historically it was the blackest. It's almost like that's the rule. Any all-white city you find probably used to be all black, and they become all white as a necessity of the means by which they acquired the land, which was normally violence, pitchforks, torches, lynching, running out a black population, taking over the town, and then closing the gate and saying, if we see any black people here after a certain time, we're gonna do this to you. So almost by the necessity of the violence in which they took over the land, they become all white places. Do you understand? So the places that are kind of mixed, or so places, they probably don't have that much of that in their history.
I hear that.
But the ones that are the white ones, those probably were the black ones historically. In the book Sundown Towns, he lists 400 towns in America, formerly black towns that are sundown towns now. Currently, not historic. 400 current sundown towns in America where they're all white populations used to be black.
Well, as I was growing up, I lived in Oakland, California, and believe it or not, in the rural, as urban as the Bay Area is, when I was growing up, you couldn't go through San Leandro at nighttime, and that's just the city right next to us. You get beat up, like, what I'm saying? This is but in the 80s though, but not the 90s. It started waning off in the 90s. By the 2000s, it was nothing. I was probably at the end of that. I'm pretty sure the 70s and the 60s. Straight sundown town.
Yeah, you couldn't really mess with black people in the 90s. I feel like in the 90s we had too much. The energy was too much, man.
Yeah, that fight the power energy, you know, it
Yeah,
it put us back on. Was that in early 90s, school days or late 80s? Or the Spike Lee
yeah.
movies?
Spike Lee movies, Lethal Injection,
Yeah, it
all
was
of
a
hip. Yeah, it
resurgence
was
of
all,
blackness that came back with a new hip. It came back with a new hip. You know,
yeah,
it was new and it was black and it was fresh and it was
yeah.
good. It was a good thing. Then they squashed that out with all the gangster rap and stuff, but whatever.
That's the crazy thing. But we had a good little run. I remember a good little run of about 8 to 10 years when Spike Lee put us on, and hip hop was putting us on. Do you remember that? I mean, you'll remember this back in the day when you like every hip hop album had to have at least one, normally more than one, but you had to have at least one conscious track on there. You can't just come up with an album of trash. You have to.
Yeah.
All right, where's your God track, man? Where's your God and the people track? You have to have one. It's like a
Well, when I
rule.
was coming up, they used to ask a question that I'm pretty sure they don't ask any artist anymore. And it was, what's your message? You feel me? You remember that? They'd be like, what's the message in this music? Now they can't be asking these people that.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
It's the opposite, isn't it? What's this? A message? No, not interested.
Now they're like, oh, this has a message.
Crazy, man. All right. Damn, we could just have this chat today. I'm enjoying this conversation with you. I'm not even gonna lie. All right, let's get down to a bit of Kemet, and we won't keep it going for too long. I know you got stamina as well, by the way, because I've been on your live stream.
Good, and I don't have.
I don't.
My wife is going to pick up my daughter, so I got like another hour. We could do it.
Perfect. Because that's probably my limit. I've seen you on live streams before. You do marathon live streams.
Yeah,
what's your longest live stream?
But you know what? I talk for 3 hours, then I let my boys go for the rest of the show, and I just be watching from the other room. But I might talk for 2 or 3 hours, and then I let some other people host the show just to keep it going.
Yeah. What's your longest live stream?
Oh, believe it or not, over 8 hours.
Damn.
I think we had one that was like 12 hours, but I don't think it was on my channel. I might have participated in one that was like 12 hours.
Whoa.
But, you know, it works because you get a lot of new people when you're streaming for that long. For some reason, YouTube will share it with a lot of new people in those long streams.
Oh, wow. That's a tech.
I know. I tripped off that. So I was like, dang.
Mm-hmm.
So when you finish streaming, it might say 200 or 100 while you watch, but you finish streaming, it'd be like 1,500.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah, that's neither here nor there. I don't really think that's the best way to do it, you know.
No, I like it though, man. I always love jump. Every now and then I just jump in your streams and I'll get hit with something crazy. It was like the one that you did the other day when you were reading that text about the battle between the Cushites, which I came to you afterwards about, but the battle between the Cushites and the Egyptians, the magic battle that they had.
Oh yeah.
That was crazy, man. I was just listening. The way that story was. Do you want to break that down a little bit, actually?
Well, we can talk about it, but then somebody rose a question that we found that the version we found of it was from Hellenistic times. Okay. And so one of my friends argued that we would have to prove that it was before the tales of Genesis. But I'm like, okay, well, Hellenistic times, it is some of that in the AD, but a lot of that is also BC times too. At least we could say when the Greeks around the Greeks in what would you call the start of Hellenism? I don't know. I wouldn't say an exact start, but I would say that
800 BC.
Know what it is, taking over people's stuff and saying you was part of that is a big part of Hellenism. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Taking stuff over and being like, oh, we've been here since forever. You know what I mean? I might be.
But explain that, because you were reading Medunetta. I can't remember. Was it hieratic or was it hieroglyph that you? Or was it the motif?
That text indeed was in. So this is the thing. The text corpus translated it back into. No, they actually only had transliteration of it. I don't even think they had the glyphs. I could pull it up, but I'm just going off memory. I think they only had the transliteration of the hieratic up there. Yeah.
Okay.
So I wasn't reading the hieratic. I
Yeah.
was reading their transliteration and their translation.
Okay. So that they had turned. So when you were talking about what you were reading, they had turned the hieratic back into Medunetta, and you were reading that.
So I was reading the transliteration. So let's talk about it. So
Yeah, please.
definitely that is the process. They would often change the hieratic into the Meduetta for academic purposes. But this particular text we were looking over, if I recall correctly, the Netjer script was not there. It was simply only the transliteration of it. I probably could pull it up in a split second. But as I recall, we were reading the transliteration. So it would simply be looking at the Latin symbols, like if somebody put an N, an F, and an R, that's what was probably there. And I knew it was Nefer because
yeah.
the N, the F, and the R. You see what I'm saying?
But I mean, the point remains it was still written in native Kemetic and then native
Yes,
Kemetic.
it wasn't written in a
it's
Greek
still
script.
written.
It wasn't written in the Greek script. But
so what's the argument being made then?
Did it predate the stories of Moses and the magician?
Oh, got it. Okay, so that's so that's what they had an issue with. Okay, well, here's the thing, and I know you're going to be able to jump in on this, yeah. But what's the easy retort for that is what's the oldest text we have for Moses and the magician? Because it's all good dating the birthplace of Christianity to be, I don't know, of Judaism to be 1200 or 1100 BC is which way they date it. But that's not the oldest text you got. Paleographically, I think the oldest text they have is AD, even of Old Testament.
I think so, but some gonna try to, because that story would be in Exodus, right?
Yeah.
When they're getting ready to leave and Moses starts.
Doesn't matter. You don't have the text, so you can't. The bottom line is, if you're gonna make a pedantic argument like that, the bottom line is the Kemetic text is older. Regardless, the text that you looked at and transliterated is definitely older.
But I wasn't because I had not probed the other side. I wasn't able to say that to my peer definitively. But I was thinking that someone could chime in and simply say that, because I'm thinking all this Moses stuff is coming from 80 times. But some other person could say no, they're going to trace it back to Babylonian exile and trying to take it to 600, the priestly tradition at about 600 BC. Scholars often try to do that with the documentary hypothesis. And so, but nevertheless, this isn't the only similarity we find and overlap, and most of them are going in one direction from the older, more antiquitous texts of ancient Egyptians up into the more recent texts. Like if we look from Amenemope up into the book of Psalms and Proverbs, if we already got other traditions going in that direction, it would be hard to argue that this one went the opposite direction.
Yeah, that's another very good argument. But I find it hilarious that they do this kind of trickery, particularly in the religious field, where it's kind of like, well, we know that this story dates back to blah, 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 because look what was happening. Right? I was like, that's all well and good. What's the oldest text you have? Because your argument is based on hypotheticals.
And you know what?
And anyone could take it, you have to prove it with some kind of a physical text. And there's no.
Well, we didn't do. I apologize. We didn't fill the listeners in on which exact text we're talking about. And so we were talking about an ancient Egyptian text where two magicians fight in a similar fashion, almost identical fashion to Moses and the Pharaoh's magician. I'm talking about all they didn't do was have a staff turn to a snake, but they were basically changing. One dude would do the magic, the other one would do the same magic, and his was better than the Nubian. It was the Nubian magician against the Egyptian magician, and the analogy tell it'll be the Pharaoh's magician against Moses. Now, and just so if people want to look that text up, it can be found on the Thesaurus Lingua Egypti, the text corpus, in the Hellenistic text section. And so I can't give you a better source on it than that.
No, that's great. And I think one of the reasons I really liked that text, because I'd never seen it before. And I love the fact that you do stuff like that on your channel where you just introduce people to these primary texts and these stories that otherwise they wouldn't connect with. This is here's something that I'm going to push on you. We need as many of these stories documented as possible.
Yeah.
Just in books that we can read, just to, even if it was to just do your translations, because I trust your translations, but do your, because at the end of the day, we've trusted so many other people to translate ancient Kemetic language. You've trusted Barge and all these other, people. It's like, no, well, I trust your translations, and I would love to see your translations, just a book of your translations of ancient Kemetic stories. Maybe pick a dynasty or pick a time period, and just, because it's so important. Hearing that story was very uplifting in many, many ways. I think one of the things that I highlighted to you was in that story, it mentioned the fact that they called Amun the bull of Meroe, didn't they? They called him, and they essentially said, Amun is your god, pointing to the Ethiopians or the Kushites, or Amun will favor them. That's their god. And what was so impactful about that is it straight away my mind cast to the 25th dynasty, and we look at Taharqa, Tantamani. They wear the crowns with the bull's horns. And I don't know if you saw the we can look back at Nama. Obviously, we were having that conversation earlier about how Kemet was established, and the Nama palette, the top iconography, obviously is the bull. In the pre-dynastic Nakada 3, I did that video about that dance. Have you seen the video about posted it very recently about the feminine figure statue? I don't know if you've seen it on my channel.
I don't know about the which statue.
So it's the feminine figure statue, and
I might have missed that one.
Check it out. It's in my latest video. But basically, the pose she's got, it's a feminine figure. It's from the pre-dynastic, and the pose is basically the hands are like that, but they're stretched and they're kind of like the arm
form. You're talking about.
Yeah, that dance, that exact pose, is a very common dance throughout Central Africa, Rwanda, Burundi, Uganda, even Sudan. But the dance is significant because the dance is an imitation of the bull. So it's a historic dance. So every society that has, because African cattle is very unique. Africa has the longhorn cattle. This is unique to Africa. No other place has this. So Africa's longhorn cattle are unique to Africa, where they have the big horns. And so all of the societies that keep the Ankole Watusi cattle do that exact same dance. And you see it in the pre-dynastic Nakada 3, a statue they've made of someone doing this exact dance 6,000 years ago. And so all of this links to, once again, Amun, the bull god, the god that is clearly significant. Even someone pointed this out to me, and I'm going to do a video on this, but I'm going to reveal this to you now because this one just blew my mind. He said the word for cow in Kinyarwanda is Inca. Inca is Ankh. Okay, so if you was to translate the word Ankh, obviously cutting off the I and the A because they're vowels, would be Inca. So it's Inkha. So that's how they say cow. And if you look at the Ankh, it's a Ankole Watusi cow from the front. I was like, whoa.
Well, he said what?
It's an Ankole Watusi cow from the front.
So if you look at the Ankh, you can see a cow from the front.
Let me show you. I'm gonna share my screen because you have to see this. This is mind blowing. And they said, he said the Ankh is just the cow. And that would be actually consistent. You're an expert here with Medu Netta, where the objects have significance.
I can't hold that. I can't hold the expert, but I am a very good student. But repeat that one time.
I'm gonna show you. I'm gonna get a good image so you can see the what Ankole Watusi cow looks like from the front, and then you can make your own judgment. Okay.
Well, Egyptology says something about it being something else.
Yeah, I mean they say life, but look at this and then tell me what you think. Yeah. I'm gonna share my screen. I know you see that, bro. I know you see that, bro.
That's crazy though. I'm sorry though. I've never seen this before, and so now that you show, when I seen the two ears is when I start laughing. You
Feel
know
it.
what I'm saying? So now, I mean, I can't agree or disagree. I can say I'm thrilled that the brother made this observation. I have not done any research on this, and so I couldn't hop out my face and say nothing about that right now. But indeed, I see the circle at the top. I see a Ankh, yo. I'm sorry.
Even the term Ankole, the people Ankole, that their people are named after the cow. You can see the word Ankh is in their name. The Ankole people. The name Ankh is in their name.
So I mean, I'm sorry, but that's something I just learned, and that's
Yeah.
dope. It's making me blush almost, you know what I'm saying? Because I was like, "What are you about to show me?" But that really looked like an aunt, though. I'm
Bro,
sorry.
it's crazy. So I'm going to show you really quickly,
Say, wow.
and I'm going to show
How
you
did
really
you reference
quickly.
that on Google so I can pull it up later?
Oh, Ankole Watusi. Just Google Ankole Watusi. That's the name of the breed of the
Oh,
cow.
okay, cool. Will do.
So if you, it didn't take me a second to find this image, because you'll see a few of them, but you'll see loads of them who have that exact horn shape. You know.
Well, I don't have anything authoritative to say about that,
Yeah.
but I could add that so many of the ancient Egyptian glyphs are said to be parts of a bovine. You know, if we look at the Netjer glyph, they say it is possibly the whole some I don't what's the trachea and different
Trachea,
parts of and with the lungs attached of a bovine though, of a particular type of bovine. And then if we look at the bull's tail, the significant the bull of
Pharaoh,
bulls, it is the piece of regalia worn by the knee suit in order to show that he is the bull of bulls. It's literally a fake bull's tail. And so, you know what I'm saying? Now, we might see it as a piece of cloth hanging off the back of him, but to them, they were mimicking a part of the bull's anatomy. And it don't stop there. And so, I mean, what about the compressed cut of leg? There's a cut of, well, I mean, so much that we could point at that are parts of the bull anatomy that it would not be a stretch for someone to write a scholarly dissertation on this and then have that injected into academia. Like, yo, look at this. No one ever looked at it like this.
I totally agree. I totally agree. And it's these cultural links that you only get these when, and this is going to sound really straightforward, but you only get these when you listen to Africans. When you talk and you listen to Africans, you're exposed to a whole, lots of things that seem like they're mysteries. Like I said, this statue that they've had in the Boston Museum, I'll bring it up for you now, just so you know which statue I'm talking about. Female figurine. Can't spell.
For the record, they call that Ankh a sandal strap, though, right?
What's that?
A sandal strap.
What do they call it? What, Ankh?
The Ankh, yeah, they say it's a sandal strap on, like a strap on a sandal, and they can show evidence of that too.
Yeah, they could, but do they have any cultural linguistic evidence, or are they just going to show the fact that it happens to be on sandals? Do you understand what I'm trying to say? They don't. I know for a fact
I ain't found no text to where they like, and the sandal strap, and then they say Ankh. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah,
that's how I look at things. But all right, let me see what you got here.
So this is the female figure I was talking about. Let me just quickly full screen it. So I don't know if you've probably seen this before.
Definitely.
Yeah. So this is the female figure I was talking about. And it's the same thing. You know, they're like, oh, mysterious pose. What is this, that, and the other? But this figure is linked to the Ankole cow. This dance, this pose is linked to the Ankole cow. So people in Rwanda, like I said, Burundi, Uganda, down to South Africa, parts of everywhere they have the Ankole Watusi cow. Literally everywhere they have the cow, they have this dance, as a part of the cultural tie. They all do it, and they do. So in the video, I'm gonna just show you a quick snip from my video. Okay, so now if I click on this, it should play with audio.
This may very well be the oldest practiced dance in the world. Since its discovery in 1907, researchers and archaeologists have pondered about this terracotta figure discovered in the El Mamariya area of ancient Egypt. The figurine's expressive and unique pose has been speculated to be an expression of a lost ritual by researchers in the Brooklyn.
So you can hear it, right?
Yep.
Okay, cool.
Museum, where it is currently housed.
It is the oldest work of Egyptian art in our galleries, and probably the oldest thing in the entire museum.
It's amazing.
For thousands of years, pastoralism and domestication of the sacred Ankole cow has spread along the Nile, and with it, the traditions of veneration. One such tradition is the native dance known as the Igishakamba amongst the Ankole.
So that's the dance there. You see it?
Yep.
That's the exact, and so and they do it in front of the cows. If that isn't enough of, you know.
Or the Amaraba amongst the Banya Rwandans. This graceful dance, amongst other things, imitates the shape and grace of the beautiful Ankore Watusi cows, which also happen to be the very species domesticated in ancient Kemet. Evidence of this same graceful movement being preserved in this figurine prove that this may very well.
So that's it there. That's just a short. I've got a longer version.
Are you familiar with the work of Dr. Shayla Monroe?
No, I'm not.
Look up. She's a sister, and she's an archaeologist, and she's a Nubiologist. Shayla Monroe, and she young. She probably your age. You know what I'm saying? She hip, and she got a lot of good work on the pastoralism culture. And I'm not saying you. I'm thinking you should. I hadn't heard her speak on that. I wasn't thinking things that she could share with you, even though there's a world of them. But that's something like you should get to her because she got a rights to dig in the ground, and she does a lot of field research, and does excavations and stuff. And I had not heard her speak of that particular breed of cattle, but I would love to see what her take would be on your video or on your research.
I'd love to, and I think it's funny that people aren't aware of the fact that this particular breed of cattle was the ancient Egyptian one, because they literally call it the cattle of the kings because they knew that this was the breed of cattle that the ancient Egyptians used to, and it's domestic African as well. So it's probably one of the reasons why it doesn't get out as well, because that breed of cattle is specifically African, the horned cattle. So if you go a bit further north to the Levant or out to the Middle East, they don't have the horned cattle. They have normal European kind of type cattle, but the Africa's domestic breed is the horned cattle. It's very resistant to diseases as well. It's a very fit and healthy breed. So yeah, that's another really nice cultural link there, man.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I'm doing a longer piece now where I'm going to try basically. So I've done a kind of a documentary on that, but it's a short one, about 7 minutes, where I've just expanded on that breed of cattle in Africa and how the dance follows it and the different names it goes by. But I wanted to do a longer video where I bring in the Ankh, like I've just shown you, and the linguistic side. So I might need to chop your ear off a little bit there as well, because I feel like every time you lift the hood on these things, I don't know. What's your thoughts actually? Whilst I've got you here, what is your thoughts on? Because I am very much intrigued, and I know that you've and ahed, but I am very much intrigued about the link between the Proto-Bantu languages, the Kenya-Rwandan, Southern African. I think the affinities are really strong. Like I said, stuff like this where you've got these root key genetic words, like what they call the sun, and all these things, that are clearly identifiably identical to ancient Kemet and other surrounding languages that are said to be close to Kemet, like the Semitic film and the other Afro-Asiatics that don't use the same words. So I don't know, what is your how much have you looked into that, and what is your thoughts about looking into deeper Africa to get a better understanding of the Kemetic language?
So I 100%, just like some people don't believe even some of the earliest European Egyptologists left that for instructions for us to get to the deeper root of the meaning of ancient Egyptian languages. Meaning, if you go in E.A. Wallace Budge's first dictionaries, where he got the 2-part series dictionary, he has a chapter called Ancient Egyptian and African Language Fundamentally. And in this chapter, he's tearing all of his counterparts apart. He like, yo, if you really
what book is this? What book is this, really quickly? Sorry.
Yes, this is Sir E.A. Wallace Budge, his 2-volume series dictionary on the Ancient Egyptian Dictionary.
I got it.
Yeah, I could probably pull up the quote, right? You got it?
I got it.
Okay, so grab book number 1 real quick if you can. Yeah, I got it over here too, but I also got I got a couple versions right on my desktop. I'm about to grab.
Is it the dictionary?
Hold up, real quick. Hold up.
Yeah,
This other one I'm talking about. I got that one too, but I'm talking about this series.
Which one you got? I got this one. I got the big one.
You talking about these right here?
Yeah. So I think this is. I think that's. Is this not the same?
Okay. Well, you got volume 1.
So this volume is.
Because he got volume 1 and volume 2, but I'll find it real quick. It's called Egyptian. Oh, he's tearing them apart. And in that book, this is what I was like, oh, this is why they really
get your one.
This is why they really discredited E.A. Wallace Budge.
Yeah. I you know what, I clocked that as well. When I saw, I think even I did a very brief part on linguistics before, and I had someone come in my chat. I think it was someone who's kind of linked with Egyptology. I don't know how much, but they're like, oh, well, you shouldn't use Budge. You should use, is it Gardner they prefer? They're like, oh, you should use Gardner. I said, why shouldn't I use Budge? Because I like Budges. First of all, I think
you shouldn't really use them, but keep going.
Yeah, they say you shouldn't use Budge, but I knew there was an agenda going there by the way she said, oh, he says things. Wow. See there?
Egyptian and African language fundamentally. If I read this, you can continue. I just wanted to show you. Continue.
No, you read it. I want to hear what it says. Read it.
Well, I gotta get my damn reading glasses. So give me a second. My eyes could not see this book. Hold up. See if I can get this in real quick. Hold up. All right, it's like Egyptian and African language fundamentally. During the years which I spent in collecting the materials for this dictionary, I looked eagerly in this text for any evidence that would throw light on the relationship of ancient Egyptian languages to the Semitic languages and to the languages of Northeast Africa. Now watch how he tell you he come up short. Oh, I thought I was on the camera. Watch how I tell you he come up short. Into the languages of Northeast Africa. It says, though the subject is one of considerable importance philologically, it has never been, in my opinion, properly discussed because the Semitic scholars who have written about it have lacked the Egyptological knowledge necessary to arrive at a decision, and the Egyptologists, with the exceptions of the laminated Brunchard, have had no adequate knowledge of the Semitic languages and literature. He says, Benfey came to the conclusion that the ancient Egyptian language had a close affinity to the Semitic family of languages, but then also said that the Semitics belonged to a greater group of peoples which not only included the Egyptians, but all people of Africa, which is obviously absurd. So I don't want to have to read the whole thing, but I'm going to go to where you start ridiculing them.
Yeah.
And you're going to say, he's going to be like, basically, y'all need to go into the Sudan. He was going hard. He was like, y'all don't know nothing. And start comparing it with Amharic and everything. And so let's see if I can find where he started getting into this.
I need to
So
get
it
your
says-
volume, you know.
It says, it is true, much of the pyramid text that recalls points and details of Semitic grammar, but after deducing all of the triliteral roots, there still remains a very large number of words that are not Semitic and were never invented by Semitic people. These words are monosyllabic and they're invented by one of the oldest African or Hamitic, he going hard. One of the oldest African or Hamitic, if that word is preferred, peoples in the Valley of the Nile, which written languages have any remains. We don't have any remains. Now it says, these are the words to express fundamental relationships of feeling, and the beliefs are particularly African and are foreign in every other particular Semitic peoples. See, he like the most like words like water and things that are essential to your civilization. He's like, these words is all foreign to Semites. But this is a very long chapter, so I just want to recall he's going over Aramaic and all these other languages that show similarities. But it was just one scathing point that I would like to read before we continue, because here goes one. So he's giving it to him right here. It says, none of the literature of the peoples who lived on the side of the Nile Valley has been preserved. We have no means to find out how much they borrowed linguistically from the Egyptians or the Egyptians from them, but I believe the Egyptians were as much indebted to them as to the Semites. So he's talking about other Africans deeper down, and you'll hear it because he's going to reveal it. I do not at one moment suggest that such literature as the modern inhabitants of the Valley of the Nile and the neighboring countries possess, whether it to be those to the east or those to the west of the Nile, can be utilized for explaining ancient Egyptian texts. So he's like, you can't use that modern Egyptian stuff to explain these ancient Egyptian texts. Now watch this. But the comparatively small amount of attention which I have been able to devote to the grammar and vocabulary of some of the languages now spoken in Eastern Sudan has convinced me that they contain much that is useful for the study of the language of the hieroglyphs. So he keep on going. He be like, the ancient Egyptians were Africans and they spoke an African language, and the modern people of the Eastern Sudan are Africans and they speak an African language, and there is consequently much in modern native Sudani literature which will help the student of ancient Egyptian with his work. So there you go, right there, talking about Sudani literature. You feel me?
And if we're talking about what year is that written?
Good question. Let me see. This says here, I gotta go back to the. Man, my eyes can't see nothing. When I text people now, they be like, "Dang, what you typing?" I don't even see the year on here. Oh, says. I'm sorry, but this is. It says the Dover edition first published in 1978.
Okay,
but it's a reproduction of something from 1920, I guess.
1920. Okay, cool. Yeah.
But anyways, I can just send you the quote if you need me to.
No, it's amazing. It's amazing.
What brought us to that is that they knew that what you recommend that we look into other African languages. They saying that's the only way you're gonna get the true understanding.
I was even because I was looking at the word punt, and I've been doing. I don't know if I told you, but I've been doing. I'm obviously can't do what you do, but I like to do just comparisons of words because I think a lot can come from that. And I was looking at the word punt because not only Sheikh Anta Diop, I always had this gut feeling, and then when this hit me, I was like, no, that I want to talk to Smash or some of the other guys who are deep into linguistics about this because I think that link is too much. So you got Sheikh Anta Diop and Wallace Budge. I found out 2 days ago. Both said that Punt is the Great Lakes region. And a lot of people will argue, no, Punt is Somalia. And I was like, I don't think it's Somalia. I think it's the Great Lakes region because the Great Lakes region has all of the the mineral deposit, the same mineral deposits you get in Somalia, the frankincense, the myrrh, but it also has that rich link and that rich history. But what actually really put me onto it was actually the way word punt is spelled, which you'll correct me, but it's PWNT, or that kind of T/D word. Yeah. So when I looked at that, I was like, well, there's two modern words that I can see that, and to be honest with you, the whole region it throws up. So I went to someone who was native to Rwanda, and I said, without vowels, you've got these. What word do you get from that? And they said Puantu, they said to me. And I said, okay, cool. That's word number one that I had in my mind. Because, you know, in Rwanda, they have, and the Proto-Bantu, they have the soft B, yeah? And the soft B is actually pronounced with a PW.
Okay.
So they don't say Bantu. The word Bantu doesn't exist. It's Puantu.
Okay.
That's how. So that's how you say the B. It's a soft B, which is basically rendered a P and a W. So it's Puantu. Puantu.
Okay.
So I was like, what? Puantu, Bantu, literally the word Bantu. Punt, literally the word Bantu. If you was going to render it.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah,
I mean,
literally the
you
word
showed me some things that I have never came across or didn't even have the knowledge to know this soft B. So I never would have examined this. And I heard you say earlier that you can't do what I do, but I definitely know that that's not true. We just look at different information a lot, and we got. But I guarantee you, if you looked at the glyphs as much as I do, you probably come to some better conclusions than me. But with that being said, I just now learned that from you about the soft B being PU, and I have no reason to disagree because as you just broke it down, if the soft B is a PU. Now let me ask you something to play not devil's advocate, but just to give a little pushback. Is Bantu supposedly, or does anyone argue that to be a truly indigenous term?
It's absolutely indigenous. Okay. I know Kamji has an issue with it because that's a long beef going back with him and Asa, Imhotep. I know they got their thing going, but it doesn't invalidate the indigenous terms. There's no one from the Bantu regions who will tell you that that's it's not an exonym. It's absolutely an endonymic term. It's absolutely a word that they use. It's there. It's translatable. It means people. It 100% means people. And then you've got Muntu, which means person. So it's got its singular. It's got its plural. So yeah, Bantu is absolutely an indigenous terminology. Because there's a lot of words that have that rendering of that PWNT. Because I was looking, because initially I saw also Burundi in that as well. Because if you had the W and the R, sometimes get that interchange when you get into those regions as well, where the W will be exchanged for an R. And so I was like, well, that's Burundi. Which one is Burundi? So you got all of these. It's weird. You got a few terms that have exactly the same ordering of letters, and you don't get it elsewhere. It's all in this little region in the Great Lakes, where they have all of where basically you're a couple of words. You also have Barwanda, has the same ordering of words again, and so it's Barwanda, Burundi, Bantu, and there was one more, I can't remember, but there was 4 of them, and I was like, all of these are legitimate, kind of like, you could see how over time the word Pawunta or Pawunti or Pawundi, however it was, could become these words, because there's no changing of the ordering, there's no elasticity, it's literally just adding vowels.
You're right, and to add more onto that, people need to realize when we say punt, that is only a scholastic rendering. Yeah. That's not. We don't think the indigenous people called it punt. We don't think that. So if you got any inclination further that, so this is what we'd have to deal with in Egyptology speak. We do know that the W. Well, not. I don't want to say Egyptology speak. I would just say in what they made out for the vernacular of the Meroe Netjer, we know that the W would be a weak consonant, so to speak. And so in their system that we don't think is accurate, they inject E's in between consonants.
Yes.
So let's think about it. If P is a consonant and W is a consonant, they would have injected a E in there, right? And said, they would have said, I'm not talking about the ancient Egyptians. I'm talking about the Egyptologists in their systems. They would have called it Poo something, but they didn't do that. They called it Punt, which indicates to me that they are viewing this W not as a because this is what weak consonants do. It can hold the place of a vowel if it needs to, or hold the place of a consonant, or fall off entirely. So it seems to indicate that they saying that W was holding the place of a shorter U sound, because we know a W is just a double U, right? Two U. So in sense, they're saying that, okay, punt. I don't know if nobody is going to say that. It was said like that, and it would probably be something like you are alluding to. I'm pretty sure most scholars will be like, no, we just call it that in Egyptology because of the consonants that we have worked out. And so, secondly, in Hatshepsut, I couldn't tell you if we read the text of Hatshepsut. We know she sent men south to 2 different locations. To Punt and also to Ta-Netjer, to go to the Holy Land to receive some type of minerals or materials, I would say. But I don't remember in the story them saying which trail they took or which way they went by or any of those things. But here's another thing to indicate: when Harkuf, he didn't get down to no Punt though. I was trying to think about when Harkuf went south earlier in like the early 5th, 6th dynasty, but we might be researching and think that he said. So okay, this is what happened. So there was one of his adventures south where he encountered a Ding brother, which will be one of our brothers of the smaller stature. But not even more so than the Twa brothers, to where they would be looked at as like what they would call a dwarf in ancient Egypt. If we look into this particular story, they were so deep south on their way to Ta-Netjer. And again, we would have to just eventually start looking at, okay, well, if you start going south from Kemet, it's not too many places you're going to wind up. You're either going to go south and wind up in that about Lake Tana region, or you might go towards Central Africa and wind up more towards the Great Lakes area, correct? So, or is that more, or what you talking about? We would be going. So let's think about it. I don't want to get too congested with my thought, but they would be going southeast to get to the destination you talking about, or not?
No, just south.
Just
so the Great Lakes would be straight down south. Southeast would be the Blue Nile. The Horn.
Farther than Lake Tana down.
That would be the first lake I think they encounter.
Some people call it Victoria or something.
Yeah.
So
that's the region. That's that exact region. And what's poignant about the fact that you point out that region is the fact that you said the story. We know that I think it was it Hatshepsut who brought back a pygmy from that region or something like that?
No, it was not Hatshepsut. That was earlier. It was for Pepi that they brought that back. I think it was Harkuf, but they were going the same directions. That's why I mentioned it on their way to Ta-Netjer. But
so I was going to say, and Rwanda, I don't know if you know, but Rwanda has a very large. So Rwanda has 3 ethnicities. It has the Tutsi, the Hutu, and the Twa. And the Twa are pygmies. They've historically lived side by side for as long as we know. So historically, we're talking about the Great Lakes region has had a very live, active pygmy population as a part of their history.
Well,
So
that's something I kind of like was trying to bring it up because I don't think we find those brothers. Say we was to go
they're not in
eastward.
Somalia.
If
Yeah.
say we was going southeastward towards the Red Sea-ish area, we
Mm.
probably wouldn't be able to find those brothers of the smaller stature, right?
No.
And so, but to be fair, this was on a trip to Netjer and not on a trip to Punt. The reason why I bring it up in this conversation because later Hatshepsut sent out people to both of those places on the same exhibition. So you kind of like think like if I say go to the store and then stop by the deli, you probably think that they're along the same route. At least you know what I'm saying. If she like yo go to Netjer and go to Punt, they possibly
probably in the same direction. So here's where my Netjer theory comes in. I think that Netjer is where the river Niger gets its name from.
Oh, so that would take you more west?
West, but the river Niger used to. Do you know that? You know this lake thing has been going on for a while, and some of the we could talk about that, but some of the drying of Sahara has been artificial and quite recent. But if you look at historic maps, the Niger River used to run right from the west coast of Africa right up to either connecting or just prior to connecting to the Nile. It used to run literally right across the body of the Sahara. And this is recent maps. We're talking 17th century maps will show this.
Well, Herodotus said that too. He said there was a western Nile.
So the western Nile would be the Niger. And it kept its name because Niger is an indigenous name. People think, oh, Niger, that's what they called it. No, it's an indigenous name, Niger. And people think that it came from the Tamashek, which is Ger Niger, or which means river of rivers in Tamashek, but it's pronounced Niger. It's always been pronounced Niger, which sounds very close to Netjer. Sounds close to me. Sounds,
so close to what?
To Netjer.
Netjer.
Yeah, sounds very close to me. Niger and
I think
Netjer
that would
sound very
be
close.
the same things. Because what vowels are you using? N, DJ, R? Yeah, and the DJ is the they do TJ. So some people tried to do TJ, but then they worked it out to TCH. Yeah. So I think those would still be
all of them are valid in my view. Because we write it with a G, but we don't pronounce a G. It's J, which could be the DJ, could be the TJ.
Okay, but when you get closer to the body of Egypt, then it would be hard to find a body of water called that. But let me break something down. There was also natron. I don't know if this helps in that research, but there's also an NTCHR, which was natron, which we form soap out of. You know what I'm saying? And this, they would go to the western. They wouldn't go that far west, but they would go to the western salt flats where they could get this natron, which has a similar consonants to NTR. And then I started to think, it's a chemical agent for cleaning. And then I don't want to take us too far off, but
that's amazing because if we're talking about the salt flats, are we talking Sahara near Mali, that kind of region?
It wouldn't go that far though. So the one that they indicate right now is called the Wadi Natron, and it is fairly close to the western desert, getting close to Libya, but not that far out of the body of Egypt. But that's not to say that this mineral or whatever they be sought after and they called it. Sometimes I just look at everything that has some like a similar vowels and try to put them and see if they are interconnected. And between this water, which they use for purification, which you said Netjer, and then they had this purification item, which was NTR. And I also seen it to be the root of where we get cleanliness being next to holiness. You heard that in many, I've heard plenty Christian people say that, but I'm like, I could prove that the ancient Egyptians thought the same thing because they labeled nature and divinity in the same way that they named one of their cleaning agents. And then you're telling me about a river that ran into the heart of Africa, which also could have possibly by some being cognate. Some linguists will say, no, that's totally not a cognate because it's not standing on 2 feet. They say, okay, one of them, y'all got the consonants correct, but y'all don't got the meanings correct or analogous with these 2 terms. And that's some pushback we might get about that. You know what I'm saying? I've had people do that before. Like, okay, yeah, well, you've matched up the consonants, but when you talk about meanings, you get 2 different things, and then it'll be harder to argue that it was a cognate terms. You know what I mean?
It brings me back to go, okay, no, cool, I'm gonna listen. But I always like put this kind of like qualifier on, is that this is where their knowledge stops, and this is how far the Kemetic language goes. You know, their knowledge stops maybe here. But I like that. I like the fact that
I've approached things with similar suspicions just like that. But then I kind of got humbled in a few situations, and I was like, oh, okay, let me just do the process in a way that I can't find any scrutiny from no party. You know what I'm saying? Because I have been humbled and like thought I knew something, and then had somebody like, well, actually, did you look at this? And was like, you know what I'm saying? And so I feel you that we do have prerogative to take license, not creatively, but just intuitively at some given point.
I think so.
But what that point is, that's what we all should ask ourselves.
I think it's the right approach. I think, like you said, we have to feel the freedom, creativity, if you want to call it that, to at least pursue that line of thought. Because what a lot of these people try and do is they'll try and stop you at the point where you get the idea. You know, Inca is not Ankh. Ankh and cow have got nothing to do with anything. And they'll try and stop you before you've even had an opportunity to research that African cows look a certain way. And then you pull them up together, and then you go, oh, actually, no, I'm gonna follow my intuition here, not listen. They'll try and stop you before you make the link. Do you understand what I mean? So it's kind of like, no, we need to have the freedom to at least explore that. Trill Black, I don't know if you're familiar with his channel. He did a live stream recently where he had a Yoruba guy on, and he was looking at some of the links between the Yoruba language and ancient Egyptian. I think it was work by Theophil Abenga, who had put these together. But what was really interesting, the reason I raise it is because they were talking about the fact that ancient Kemetic or ancient Egyptian, we look at it through this Western literal lens, but a lot of African languages, I would say a majority of African languages are tonal. And in tonal, it basically means that you can have one word, and I can't remember what word they had. I think it was ab or something like that. But they had I should know I'm Yoruba, but I can't speak a lick of it. But they had one word, and it had like 8 different meanings depending on how you said it. So it'd be like oba, 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 oba. Like, so imagine one word and you've got 8 completely different meanings. But they said this is what you find in Kemetic, where you get the same word, it's pronounced the same way, spelt lots of different ways. They all think about that, and the way that the Western mind will look at that will say, they'll probably say something like, oh, well, they probably had different vowels between them. You know, that's because they're thinking along the way that their language works, where there's no tonality. You know what I mean? A cat is a cat. It's a cat. I don't know if it goes cat or cat. It still means cat. Do you understand what I mean? Whereas in the African languages, a lot of African languages, the meaning changes. I think you get that the same thing in Mandarin and some of the East Asian languages. They're tonal as well, where you can have the word, but you have to say it in a certain way. And I feel like this is an entire layer of linguistic understanding that we completely lose, because, like, once again, these guys come along and they go, well, this is how you translate the language. It's kind of like, well, you don't. All due respect, do you know? You know?
I mean, that's a very good point you're making. What can I say? It has to have a lot to do with it. Because they could have made the same inflections by changing the vowels, but if we have evidence that they would have 7 different meanings on a word with the same vowels, then we would probably our understanding of Medu Neter, we can see, would probably be really limited to we'd only be extracting one meaning anyway, because we don't even know how to observe these other tones or way to say the word. Suppose if what you were saying was actually true and we just say Nefer every time. But Nefer probably means something different. You know what I'm saying? Or Nefar.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, well, that would mean that we are just on level A of our understanding of the ancient Egyptian language.
But it's interesting because AAVE does the same thing.
In a sense.
It does. It does. That's you introduce the same, you can say the same word and it can mean completely different things depending on your tonality in AAVE. So it's amazing that you guys have, it's almost like you tapped into that. Do you know what I mean? So you're speaking the language, the same language as them, but then you
can take actually the word bad,
made it tonal. Yeah.
You can take the word bad and do it.
Yeah.
Because if you say I'm bad and you don't put the Michael Jackson hiss on it, people be like, what did you do? You know what I'm saying? But if you was like, I'm bad, then they're gonna be like, oh, you're a bad mama. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But if you just take the and switch it to my bad, then they're gonna think that you made a mistake of some sort, or that you're atoning or apologizing for something. And normally when you say my bad, it's going to be it's going to have an add on it, like my bad. Like, you can, I mean, I'm just making fun of what you're talking about, but it's showing that it is some truth behind it, even in AAVE, you know what I'm saying? And by the way, they call it AAVE, but that dialect even go further than just African Americans. This is just where they notice the phenomenon. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I'm telling you, ancient Egyptians used to say stuff like, I be chilling. But when I do a translation, I can't write I be chilling because it's not going to live. I mean, I'm saying when I do it for no academic authority, I can do whatever I want. But if I want to get a grade on that paper, I have to figure out what came to me naturally. I be chilling and be, how do I say this in the King's English? I exist in the state of coolness.
Yeah.
And you know that he was not saying I exist in the state of coolness. He was like, I be chilling. I nuke. No, he would be like, I nuke. Well, I nuke might be too profound of a statement. So they would probably be like, when and for cool and Quebab. Winnie Quebab. Literally, Winnie Quebab. Win is to exist. E is saying I exist, and Quebab is like cool. Or in a state of coolness. So I'll be like asking the grammarian, tell me this, don't say I be chilling. And it's Daniel Selden who wrote the book to qualify. Yes, it really actually does.
Yeah. That's dope. That's so
crazy,
dope.
Right?
Yeah, it's so dope. It's so dope, man. We need, like I keep saying, man, we need our lenses, man. We need to look at this through our lenses. I'm telling you, it's so important. I think talking about the conversation we were having offline, I was talking about the fact that I want to do my PhD, and none of this is so that I can take all of the available tools, just much like you've done with the linguistics, take all the available tools and then go, okay, thanks for that. Now I need to apply our lens to it. Do you understand what I mean? That's where I think we tap into things. Because like, even just like with the conversations we've been having with these cultural links, they don't look for them, they don't get them. And you know what, I've got to a point now where I don't even care if they look for them or not. You know what I mean? It's kind of like,
you know what, I don't know how old you are, but I'm 50 and I can tell you you could possibly have your PhD before you reach my age. You know what I'm saying? And so it might be like that. And so even if I'm 50, I'll be looking, okay, before I'm 60, I could really have one and then just write the documents I need and feel like I did my job. That ain't necessarily, I got accepted in the University of Manchester on my own impetus. And if you know what, they also had a little thing. Yeah, and I just didn't do it. It was crazy because they wanted me to pay. And they had a cool little tuition. They would have offered me support, but it was.
What were they offering? Was that a PhD?
It was not for a PhD. It was to get my certificate in Egyptology, which would lead
Yeah, they're
They got a
probably
long
done
process.
research.
A
Yeah.
3-year certificate before you can even try to get your master's or anything.
Can you still get that?
At Manchester.
Can,
But I just wanted to let you know they have
Yeah.
something for admissions there where if I couldn't show them my previous academic prowess at it, they said you can show your believe it or not, economic prowess. Like if you're a good businessman or if you can show that you're thriving and you run a good company, that would allow you admittance into the university. So not only did I send them my documents I was writing on chematology, I also showed them, look, and I also own hieroglyphics.com. You know I'm a businessman because y'all should have thought to buy this URL. You know what I mean? And so they let me in, but I didn't. I thought over it, and I got children in college right now. So it's kind of like you started too early. First, wait till your kids get out, because I should have did it 20 years ago. And since it's their turn now, I gotta wait till they get off the ride and then refocus back on me. You know.
Fair enough. That's fair enough. That's fair enough. But I like I said, I am waiting for. Yeah, for you to just do some of those works, man. Because I think what you do is so valuable, man. Just to even, like I said, even if it was just a book of stories, I think that would smash it, man. Because there's so many texts that just go on.
I like that idea. Thanks for the
I love it.
Thanks for the inspiration. Because sometimes you think you got to sit up and come up with all the creativity, but this idea is simply taking things from one format and putting it in another and making it more accessible for people who don't do the research. That's totally fine. I appreciate that idea.
Yeah, and I'd love it because I would I would reference it a million times. Even what we are going back to that whole bull of Amun. You know, we spoke about the fact that Amun was seen as the southerner's god, by the Egyptians, So do you know the word for God in the Bantu languages is Imana?
Oh, I would probably believe that, but
Imana. That's the exact word. You know, we pronouncing it wrong.
Say God though.
Yeah,
you know
they say
I mean?
Amun, but that's their great deity. It's Imana. Imana, and and I always said that's like people missed out the fact, and I'm sure you didn't, but all of the Meroite queens had the Amani. They all had the Amani prefix. So Amani Reynas, Amani this. They all started their name with.
And so I started looking
Yeah.
at how much of those names we could translate into the Medu Netjer, and how much of those names do we see that they injected some differentness from the South. And it's kind of interesting, and people don't really like it. But if you research them names at a certain time period, they started adding Yah onto their names and L's, bro.
Nice.
And I don't know how much people want to.
Oh, bro, listen, now you're going deep.
They did it. They really did it. And
because
so
people will tell you that.
Go ahead.
No, I want you to finish your point, man, because I've got a guy right now who's in my Discord, and they will tell you that Israel was always in Africa, Central Africa. This place up there that they just chose, this landmass that they chose, where the Palestinians were chilling, has got nothing to do. Israel was always in Central Africa.
Well, I've heard that argument, but then I'll be looking at the text that contradict that. So they have the question like, we get the from about 400 or 500 BC, the Elephantine papyri. And in this series of papyri is some Jews who lived on Elephantine Island who wanted to rebuild a temple to Yahweh. And they was petitioning, I think it was Cyrus or one of the makeshift pharaohs who wasn't a Persian pharaoh who took over at the time, that was asking them, could they build this temple to Yahoo next to a temple of Amun down on Philae Island or Elephantine. And so those people seem to have not been like from there. I mean, I can't just look at the text and say, see, they're not from here. But the manner that they were.
But that doesn't mean they're from north. They could have been. Remember, Africa wasn't just like one big unified.
I don't mean that was from the north, but I'm thinking that they might. I mean, yeah, you're right. I ain't got nothing to say that they was from the north, but they just was like might have been from somewhere. They could have been from a different part of Africa. You saying?
That's what I'm thinking. I by no means I'm suggesting that they were unified or they formed one. Like they were every bit as the Exodus story, even though we don't think it happened, but the Exodus story still could have happened the way it happened.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter. Like people got this homogenous view. Like Africa is very vast, and Africans have always fought, always historically. You know, they've always had different groupings of people that just didn't like each other. But all of those stories that we've geolocated in our minds to different parts of the Middle East and Eurasia, I think a lot of these stories took place in Africa. And
I mean, well, in order to make that statement ring true, I mean, up after a certain period of time, there is like Hezekiah and them. Then people will start talking about it. They find these Egyptian rings where they could find that they were vassals to Egypt. But 100% correct. Before that time period, you can't find that. I mean, we got a lot of biblical archaeology that just come up empty for what we call biblical times. They can't find nothing in the forefathers' times when they look through the sand. But then if you go 1,000 years later, they might find, basically when we get around Hezekiah and Taharka really coming up there to save Jerusalem, it wasn't because of the Yahweh said so. It was because they was the little homies and they was paying vassalage back to Egypt. And so then he was like, well, if some other dudes about to smash on y'all, I got to come defend y'all. So in the Bible, they wrote that. So here's two funny parts that didn't want to give credit to the Africans. Herodotus tells the stories and said at nighttime, 100,000 mice came and ate up all the Assyrians' weapons and they couldn't fight in the morning. But the Bible say, the angel of God swooped on him at night. But the only reality of the situation is Sennacherib says to Hezekiah, "Oh, you trying to call the king of Egypt to help you? You trying to?" And this is the funnier part, and I'm gonna leave this alone. And this is another thing that indicates to the dual kingdom that we will have to talk about one day when we get the time. Because this upper and lower thing ain't understood correct. There's a scholar named, dang, I can't forget my partner name, Jeremy Pope right now, who teaches on the double kingdom and how we might not understand Egypt correct. Well, notice in the Bible, Sennacherib says this. He was like, you trying to get Egypt to help you? Wait. He called Egypt and Cush basically the same thing. He was like, you trying to get Egypt to help? Cush ain't gonna be able to do nothing. I'm paraphrasing.
You know what's crazy? I remember reading that back in my Christian days a long time ago, because that was like, you think these guys can help you? Like,
exactly. But when he referenced them, he referenced Cush and Egypt like it was just a monolith. And so basically what it was saying is
everyone did.
The initial point, there's so much before these time periods that they don't come up with any archaeology. But when we fall into a certain area in history, far after 1000 BC, maybe we get to the 600s, we start seeing real accounts in that tale. And then I don't want to keep expounding, but we got to remember that the Bible was only put together like that by King James. So that would mean, it was one book somewhere that had some truth in it, and then y'all glued 60 books together. That'll make the other 59 true. You see what I'm saying? And I'll just leave it at that. You know what I'm saying?
No. It's a very good point. I've got a lot to say about it, but I'm not going to go into it. I got a lot to say about it because I think that one of the things is we always take for granted we get told a narrative, and then everybody. One Egyptologist who was known for this was Petrie. Petrie was like a mad, I don't know what you want to call him, a bibliophile or I don't know, like he was crazy, kind of like make everything work from the biblical perspective. That was like one of his main driving forces in or
Not only
motivations.
that was half of his funding. And
Yes.
you know, the money who put behind it was religious money too, so to speak. So he had to come up with something. But keep going.
No, you're right. Absolutely spitting facts. Yeah. So what's happened is we've had this skewed perspective of academics where this book called the Bible has been responsible for so much historical distortion. It's unbelievable, because a lot of what we call history and Egyptology for that entire period of 1750 to at least 1900 dominated a lot of the thinking, and a lot of it was just make Christianity great again, make the Bible fit, make, you know, so much destruction, distortion was done in the name of making the biblical story make sense.
You're right.
You know, and we have and that we don't realize we've inherited so much of that baggage. And that's why it sounds crazy when someone turns around and goes, "Oh, that's not there. That place is in Africa." You know, what are we talking about?
You know what? You're right. And I never really looked at it that way. You know, some of the first, if I have to call them Christian apologists, they might not traditionally be called that, but some of the first Jewish historians, I'll say, were indeed, in a sense, just Christian apologists, because what they were doing, I mean, you know, we all heard the story of Manetho, the Christian priest. I said Christian. Manetho, the Egyptian priest.
Yeah.
Well, when the Greeks took over Egypt, they looked around like, damn, everything's so old. Who's going to explain this stuff to us? So they start looking around for a priest who would read the glyphs. They couldn't find nobody. They got Manetho. So I think it was Ptolemy the First Soter, or Ptolemy, people don't like to pronounce the T's, Ptolemy Philadelphians, right? Who basically got Manetho to write out the history of Egypt for them. Now, when Manetho wrote out the history of Egypt, he did, like, some of the arcane and some of these new age places like to take, and this is actually a quote, they said that the ancient Egyptians like to take a prerogative with antiquity, and they would go as far back as 36,000 years with their history. And so since it didn't fit into the Hebrew creation myth, we have the documentation and the accounts. All they say is that the Egyptians thought in lunar years, which we know not to be true now, but we accept that when we want to do the truncation or the periodization of the history of Egypt. They take the 36,000 years that was left to us with the Zep Tepi and the Tales of Manetho, and they say they're lunar years, right? So that would, they say they're lunar and not solar years. A solar year, 365 days, but a lunar year be 30 days. So that gave them the prerogative to divide the number they had by 12. And this is where we get to 3100 BC is when Egypt started. Just divide 36,000 by 12 and you're going to come up with 3,200 or something like that. And so we be thinking that this is facts, but what they really was doing, and we can pull up the books. One of the best books to get all the evidence I'm talking about is a book wrote by, I think his name is L.G. Waddell, but it's definitely Waddell, Waddell, and the book is called Manetho. Now, we don't have the surviving works of Manetho. What we have is the people who tried to refute him. You feel me? In that book, he shows all of the Christian Egyptologists, all of the Christian apologists trying to break down basically the Manetho's argument. Oh, you got it right there. Oh, my man. So
I got Manetho right here.
That's the real. So is it WG? Is it LG Waddell?
WG Waddell, like you said.
Yeah, WG Waddell. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
That's that book right there, boy.
Yeah.
I only got the PDF, so you really the man for that. So
I'm gonna go into it. Yeah.
In that book, I'm gonna let you know. It has the accounts of Eusebius. It got I mean, I'm not letting you know, but I'm just saying it has.
No, I ain't read it yet, so feel free.
yeah,
Feel free. It's on my to read list. Yeah.
It has the accounts of Julius Sextus Africanus, and it has the accounts of one other guy. I think his name was Caecilius or something. But what you see is they are openly talking about in that book. They're openly like, "Yo, this should say 24,000 years. What we gonna do?" Like they really like, and so they're coming up with, and it's written right there. And so I'm like, "Yo, all we got to do is show the people this," and they're like, "Okay, this is what we'll do." The ancient Egyptians take this grandiose prerogative with their antiquity, so we're going to say it was lunar years divided by 12 and tell everybody their history started in 3100 BC. And then they'd be like, that fits perfectly with the Hebrew tale. Like, it'd be just that bad, yo.
Yeah. And it placed Egypt just behind Mesopotamia, which is another plus point for them, because then they don't have to say the first civilization ever was an African one.
Yeah, I mean, you know what, that argument, I'm gonna take it up eventually, the Mesopotamia, Egypt one, but to me, it's kind of like, you know what, y'all is just so funny with all of these. I mean, it's like messing with a whack chick, yo. dealing with this stuff they give you, because they lies be set up in ways to where if you felt like putting in the effort, you can just simply dismantle it. But then they're so witty and constructive with the way that they put it together. You a bunch of drama. Like, what's all this? And now, of course, they give us a so you want to know how deceitful they got with that one? You wouldn't even believe it. You can go to the King James New Edition version of the Bible. Go to Genesis 2:13. They even put a footnote in there to change the word Cush. You wouldn't even believe this. We all know what Cush means, and we all know what it meant historically. But they went to Genesis 2 when they said, and 2 and 13 when the rivers ran through the land of Cush and all this stuff. And they put a footnote that says, this Cush ain't the Cush you thinking about. This Cush is somewhere in Mesopotamia. It literally say that.
Bro, let me sorry.
Genesis 2:13. I'm gonna pull it up too, right on the what you call it. Go ahead. What you looking at?
This book here, talks about the blameless Ethiopians. Yeah. And you know what they say about that? Oh, this Ethiopia is not the same as the Ethiopia that you think it is. This is not African. This is mythical. What are you talking about, man? Ethiopia existed in the time of the Greeks. You can't say they just used the name of a place that was known to everyone and was real to describe a place that never existed. Like, it's wild the way they do that, man.
Yeah, I know.
That's so crazy.
Right here, Genesis 2:13. Because when they describe in the Garden of Eden, it says the name of the second river is Gihon. It is the one that flowed around the whole land of Cush. So they're describing the Garden of Eden in Africa. And then the people figured that out, and they went and put a footnote. And I'm going to show you. When you read the footnote, you'd be like, so God needed a footnote, huh? So God needed a footnote. He couldn't have just wrote it the way he intended us to understand it.
Yeah. They love their transliterations and their commentaries. They love their commentaries. They're essential to to you reading the Bible correctly. That's what they don't want you to read the Bible. They want you to read it the right way.
I know, and it'd be crazy.
Don't trust your lying eyes, man.
So let me see if I can find this footnote. It's so crazy how they went that far. But this
and obviously, just to add on the point that you're making there, while you find that, the going back to this whole idea of stuffing everything into the biblical narrative, we know that Abraham came from Ur, and Ur was in Mesopotamia. So it all leads into that. We've pushed the date back. Mesopotamia comes first. The Bible states that Abraham came out of the first ever civilization. All of it leads in, whereas historically, they don't want to turn around. And every time someone does a video about, oh, where was the birth of civilization? Imagine if all of those videos start off, well, Africa was the birthplace, not only of mankind, but of civilization. The first civilization ever was in Africa. But you don't hear that. Every time someone's got a video or books released, it's kind of like, oh, the birth of civilization, Mesopotamia. It's like, come on, you know
Let me
that's not
share the
true.
screen real quick. Watch
Yeah,
this.
go on. Take it.
So this is what the trip off. And now you caught him. We caught a red hand.
One second, let me put it on.
All right, yeah. Now check out. Notice the version I'm in is the new international version.
Yeah.
And it says the name of this is Genesis 2:13. The name of the second river is Gihon, and it winds through the entire land of Cush. Let's read the footnote that God needed a footnote to
I can see it.
Look, possibly southeast Mesopotamia. But let me show you something that's gonna really
It's wild, man.
This didn't even.
Where did they get that from?
Hey, this is gonna freak you out. Watch this. When I go to the King James version, you're gonna say, heck no. You want to know why? Because in the King James version, the word ain't even Cush. It's Ethiopia. So now they got caught. No one would have did this research to catch them like this. But you can clearly see they got caught because the original text that they came from said Ethiopia here, right? And they took it and said Cush. Well, unless, of course, we think that the King James Version was in Hebrew, the King James Version was in English. And so he wrote Ethiopia right there. You see what I'm saying? So now they're saying either King James and his translators didn't know what he's talking about, but they basically changed Ethiopia to Cush so that they could tell you Cush is in southern Mesopotamia in the newer version of the Bible.
Bro,
but how could Ethiopia be in Mesopotamia?
That is wild.
Got him.
It shows how recent and deliberate their lies are. Because when people like that shows you, they've made that up. Somehow it's just not sat well with them.
They took the Garden of Eden out of Africa and said, let's plop it right over here. You know what I'm saying?
Crazy. That is absolutely
crazy.
But
I don't want to, I got to go pick up my daughter and stuff.
Yeah, that's my problem. Thank you, brother. You know what? This one here, we just had a great chat, bro. I might just post this up as a video by itself. I've enjoyed this, man. I'm not even going to lie.
However you're willing to share it, if you want to edit up to certain topics or just give it to them raw. This was wonderful chat, and I appreciate you for bringing me on the show. For the people who don't know, I'm Smash Rockwell, casual from Hieroglyphics Crew, casual rap god on Instagram. Tap in with me. Also, Smash Rockwell on YouTube.
Make sure you do check out Smash's channel. He is a leading translator of ancient Kemetic texts. As you saw in the chat we had, we're trying to convince him to publish more work because he's so needed and so vital. And yeah, I love your channel. You know that already. We've had massive, wicked interactions, and I think we'll definitely do the Kemet part 2 thing. But I think this in itself has been amazing chat, brother. Appreciate you, man. I'll put all your links inside the description, guys. Check out Smash Rockwell, casual from the hieroglyphics. I don't know, man. Too many accolades to give you, man.
Oh man, you don't have to worry about that. I just appreciate you, and it feels like an honor, even to be brought on your show. So that's an accolade right there. You know what I'm saying? I was on the King Monologue show. You know what I'm saying?
On his own mind, bro. On his own mind, man.
I'm gonna be back out to Europe this year too, so maybe we're gonna get the crew back out there towards the end of the year. So I'm gonna see you again. It's good.
Oh yeah, definitely. If you come down, we got to link up, man. Definitely.
Yes, sir.
My brother, thank you for your time, man. I appreciate you, man.
Word up. Thank you.
All right, take care. Peace.